Well, I guess I'll just assume it's working. I don't know what else to do. Um, got a couple minutes before we start. So, just for fun, I'll show you some computers. This is a Russian computer. It's brand new, never been used. Um, yeah, Russian computers tend to be kind of junky. They're kind of like toys. They tend to be copies of Western computers. Um, People who grew up using them report that they hated the experience. Um, but they're kind of fun. Here's a Tesla computer. The Tesla. So Eastern European computers, a lot of stuff generally in Eastern Europe, they use the Tesla name because he's kind of a hero out there. This is an MSX computer. MSX is a standard that wasn't really around in the US, but in Europe, South America, places like that, Asia, it was a really big deal in the 80s and 90s. So, I guess we will get started, even though I don't know that this is working really. Hard to say. But yeah, I'll get started. So my name is John Bumstead. I have a small refurbishing company called Roadkill Incorporated. Been in business for like 15 years. Yeah, so basically what I do, I was in the corporate world. I was hating life. Figured out I could buy and sell computer stuff for money. And long story short, I ended up buying thousands and thousands of broken, mostly MacBooks from electronics recyclers and repairing them, refurbishing them, and then selling them wholesale, mostly. So wholesale meaning selling to consumers, and selling to people who then sell to consumers. So like selling volume to people who would then sell in a store or sell on marketplaces, that kind of thing. So yeah, recyclers, I discovered, are these places where all the institutions of the world dump their stuff. And so recyclers are just these amazing places where you just have massive amounts of electronics, massive amounts of all kinds of things. That's just the perfect place for a business to buy inventory. And there are thousands and thousands of businesses that buy from recyclers stuff that they turn around and put back into the world, which is as it should be. That's a very positive thing. So yeah, so I buy from recyclers. Thousands of computers a year. Recyclers, they need our help. They have too much stuff to process, and so a lot of it gets scrapped because they just don't have the time to take every one of millions of devices and refurbish it and put it back into the world. So they really have to make hard decisions. And a lot of it in their mind is not financially viable. So it gets scrapped. But as refurbishers, we can help them out. We can go to them and say, hey, let me take that off your hands. Let me give you more than scrap value. Scrap value is the value of the thing broken down into metal, plastic, logic boards, stuff like that, and then sold for the raw materials. A laptop can get about $8 to $12 scrap value depending on the market. So if you go to recyclers and say, hey, I'll take all of that stuff and I'll pay you twice scrap value, it helps them because they're getting more money, and then it's good for you because you're getting a low-cost product and it's not getting scrapped. So anyway, getting off on a tangent, starting a small business has been the best thing I've ever done. Like a million different opportunities have come out of starting a small business, and I've trained, probably 100 to 200 people to start their own small businesses, kind of based on the same principles as me. And that's the really rewarding thing to see, people out there who I've helped out, who are in thriving businesses and they're independent and they're, happy with that independence and they're not having to go work in a corporate job they don't like. So the thing about repair, you realize quickly when you get into the repair business is that you're an activist by default. There, you start doing this, and you think repair is a good thing, good positive thing. Everyone thinks about repair and thinks positive thoughts, but you start doing that professionally and you notice all of these problems. You notice that the world is acting against you, that companies are acting against you, that certifications are acting against you. So I say, like, by default, you're an activist. In a disposable world, to repair is to rebel. That's a common saying. Um, you notice that, for example, that marketplaces, like I was on Amazon. I sold on Amazon until Apple and Amazon created an agreement and they kicked off all their small sellers. So, and that was a big activism thing I got involved in. So you have a problem trying to sell your material. Then you have, an antitrust issue. Then you also have issues trying to buy material. A lot of the recyclers, while you think they would be happy to, sell you material to repair and refurbish, you have these certifications that put up barriers that require a ton of processing and sort of nonsense paperwork and that sort of thing in order for something to be eligible to be sold for repair and refurbishing. And that work that has to go into the paperwork and the processing and the testing, that amounts to a cost, and that cost tanks the viability of the viability of selling for repair and refurbishing. Because if something's only worth $10, are you going to put $5 worth of labor into it? No. So what it does is it pushes entire categories of product over the line, they call it, of viability, and it pushes it into that scrap realm where they scrap it and just recoup the scrap money. So yeah, you have antitrust issues. You have, as far as selling the stuff, you have certification issues and other related issues as far as getting the stuff. And then you have the topic at hand today. You have the issue of locks. These locks that are put onto the machines that basically kill the ability of that machine to be used, to brick the machine. So a little bit of history, like back in the day, if a recycler had data destruction requirements, they would just pull the hard drive. It was pretty tricky usually to wipe the drive sufficiently in the device, so they would just pull the hard drive. And that sucks. As a refurbisher, you get hundreds of machines without drives. They're missing screws, they're missing caddies, things like that. But at least, hey, you get computers. At least they can comply with their requirements, pull the drive, and then sell the computer. But what's happening now, as of 2016, is, with MacBooks at least, the drive is part of the board. So if they can't be bothered to figure out how to wipe the drive that is part of the board, they can't pull the drive anymore, they have to pull the board. So a lot of recyclers, as of 2016, started pulling boards on newer machines. And then on top of that, you have the lock. In the old days, there was something called a firmware lock on MacBooks. Those were fairly easy to bypass. But then came activation lock, like 10 years ago. Activation lock, it's not a lock that is local to the device. It's not something that's on the device that you need to get rid of. It's based on serial number. And if you think of like Apple as like the network administrator of all Apple computers that exist, like Apple has the locked serials basically in a list. So when you turn on a machine and the machine says, "Hey, I'm alive, let's get set up and ready to run," and you go through the setup wizard and you log into Wi-Fi, then that machine does a handshake with Apple and it says, "Hey, Apple, am I okay to be used again?" And Apple looks at the list and says, no, you're a locked device, so I'm going to show a lock screen. And that's this here. So this is an activation locked M1 air. This is a white device, but it is still locked. So it's not something that has to be fixed on the local machine. It's the Apple network actively saying that is going to be locked. And so 10 years ago or so, iPhones and iPads started getting locked because activation locked was a feature. And millions of recyclers started scrapping, well, recyclers started scrapping millions of iPads and iPhones, I should say. And to this day, most recyclers, they see that lock and it just gets scrapped because they figure it's not worth dealing with. They figure the work required to sell for parts, that kind of thing, is just too much. So that's just the norm. But then as of 2018, what happened is in 2018, Apple released the T2 chip, the T2 security chip. And what that does effectively is that it enables the possibility of activation lock on MacBooks and other devices, Mac Minis, things like that, iMacs. And so, yeah. So I predicted in 2018 that there would be a flood of scrapped T2 machines eventually at recyclers, and that's what's happening now. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing institutions dump piles of locked T2 and even M1, the newer chip machines, with recyclers, and the recyclers are just saying, we just need to scrap these. There's no reasonable way to deal with these. They can wipe them, but then they're still locked. And the certifications do not help with this. They do not make it easy to process these machines. Yeah, and so that's where we are now. We're at the point where we're starting to see a flood of these newer machines, and they're basically just getting scrapped. Best case scenario, recyclers will pull the board and sell the device for parts, but that's not even good because you have serialized screen assemblies that, when attached to a computer that doesn't match, they lose True Tone. And the top case and Touch ID stuff, if that's switched to a different machine, then you lose those features. So you can't even effectively sell these for parts anymore because you lose features, and then it's not a machine you can sell as a retail machine. So where are we here? Wow, 12 minutes already. I better speed up. So anyway, institutions. The problem here, it's a complex problem. What happens and why these machines are locked is that a lot of institutions just don't care enough to remove the lock. So people say, oh, it's stolen. It's not stolen. Big company dumps 1,000 machines with a recycler. They just don't bother to go through the Apple procedure to disassociate the iCloud ID with that computer. And so they just figure this is trash. This is a mountain of trash. Why should we spend dozens of hours going through these? Why should we go through our administrator tools and unlock these, et cetera, et cetera? They just they see that as work. They think this is trash they're getting rid of. They assume they're going to be scrapped, possibly. There's not necessarily... Sometimes there's a contract in place to destroy them. Typically, though, it's just... I see comments. Good. Comments are working. Yeah, art projects. That is... I do art with broken machines, actually. But yeah, they assume they're going to be destroyed, and so they just dump them. And then the recyclers get them, and the recycler cannot do anything with those. And there are other things too, like, a large number of machines in this country are disposed of through drop boxes. Well, there is an Apple process to remove the lock, but it requires basically an original invoice, and they really only do it for consumers. So someone who has like one machine and it's their machine and it got locked and they have the original invoice. So you can go through that procedure and there's a chance they'll unlock it for you. But if you're institutional, if you're a recycler that just got 50 or 100 or 1,000, you don't have an original invoice. There may have been 5 recyclers that own these before you, and the donating companies, when you call them up and say, "Hey, can you unlock these for me? Can you get me an original invoice?" Well, they were too lazy to unlock these in the first place, to take iCloud off in the first place. So they don't return calls. They're probably even suspicious if you call up and do that. They're like, "What? We thought these machines are going to be destroyed, and you're telling me that you're trying to unlock them? What's going on?" So yeah, this process I know lots of recyclers, as probably 100 active recyclers, and none of them have had success saying, "Hey, I have 300 legitimately acquired locked machines, and can you help me, Apple?" Apple just does not help with that. So another reason this comes about is that institutions are supposed to use institutional iCloud logins for their company machines, but many don't. They let users say, "Hey, yeah, you can log in with your personal iCloud." And okay, the problem with that is, if that employee gets fired or quits suddenly, or whatever, for whatever reason, leaves the company and then turns in their laptop that they haven't unlocked, then the company has no ability to unlock that device. So even if the company wanted to, they couldn't at that point, because then they would have to somehow convince their ex-employee who's pissed at the company, that kind of thing. So okay, so the big question is, and what time is it? Gosh, I talk too much. I really want to get to the questions. Anyway, so the big question is, people always say, "Well, why do you buy locked machines? Why isn't it? This is a simple problem to solve. You just tell the institutions, 'Hey, I won't take these machines unless they're unlocked.'" And that leads to a discussion of the recycling industry, which is a very screwed up industry that's backwards in a lot of ways. And people just don't understand that there are elements of the recycling industry that make this pretty much impossible. And to sum it up, if you think of a customer-vendor relationship, okay, I'm a customer of a vendor. So the vendor is usually happy that I'm a customer. The vendor, treats me well because I'm a customer. And because I'm a customer, I can be hard on the vendor, because they're lucky they have my business. That's the traditional scenario. How it works in the recycling industry, though, is the recycler is lucky to have its customers, which are the donating institutions, even institutions that sell them stuff. Because people who have good piles of stuff that they want to get rid of, that's worth money. And they can give it to anyone. So if you're a recycler and some big company chooses to dump their stuff with you, you don't ask questions. You don't make demands. You don't say, "Thank you for the 1,000 computers, but we need you to go through them one by one and make sure they're not locked, and take dozens of hours of your time to do all of this and blah blah blah." Guess what? That big truck that shows up with all that stuff in it, if you make that demand, that truck will go down the street to the next recycler that doesn't bother asking questions, because you're asking them to do work, and they're not going to do that work because they're the customer in this situation. The dynamic is flipped. So yeah, you're, and not only that, but they don't know what they're giving you. The thing about the recycling industry is that it's very rare for anything to ever be inventoried. When a truck full of random crap shows up, you don't get a printout of what exactly that is. Chances are the people giving it to you don't even know what it is. That's the thing. So the answer, you can ask them for the answer. They won't even know if it's unlocked or not. So there's that. And then when it comes to, resellers, refurbishers buying from recyclers, the recyclers don't necessarily even know what they have. They don't have the time to inventory that. They don't have the time to go through and see if they're locked. And then as a refurbisher, it's the same thing. I'm lucky to be the recycler can sell that stuff to anyone, and I'm lucky that they're selling it to me. So if I make that demand of the recycler, hey, I won't buy this unless you go through them and make sure they're not locked, they're going to sell them to someone besides me. So this gives you an idea of the flaw in the system, why that does not work out. And that's 2% of the problems with the recycling industry. It's just a massively messed up system that defeats its own purpose in so many ways. But that gives you a sense of why it's not just an option to, just ask them, why are you buying locked devices? I can see a repair store being able to do that. Like someone comes in, wants to sell a MacBook, it's locked. If I was in a repair store, I would definitely say, okay, this is locked. I'm sorry, but I don't buy locked devices. But in the bigger world of the recycling industry and the majority of devices that exist in the world coming through the recycling industry, it's just not that simple. Okay, so I mentioned there's the Apple process. It doesn't work, though, really, if you don't have an original receipt and you're not the consumer. Recyclers don't get original receipts for 1,000 devices that come in a big truck. And so what I say about this over and over and over again is when you have millions of devices getting scrapped, if the outcome of a design, if you think of it like a scientific experiment, if you put this experiment in place, which is activation lock, and the outcome is that millions of devices get scrapped, you can't blame all of the people and all the institutions. You have to blame the design of the system. It's just self-evident. You can't teach activation lock in third grade. That's absurd. Activation lock is software, and software iterates. That's the beautiful thing about software. Software can change. You put software into the world, like the scientific method. You put it into the world. The world tests it. It gives you feedback. You take the feedback, you iterate the software. But people have this idea that software, that for some reason, activation lock is a piece of software that is perfect. And you can't, like a religion, you can't question activation lock. It's perfect. It's necessary to avoid theft, and that's just it. You're done. Which is, again, it's just absurd. It is software. It can iterate. It can improve. I have a couple ideas as far as how it can improve. People think of it as a black and white issue. They think of like, well, if we're going to have this anti-theft device, then millions of devices need to be scrapped. And if we don't have millions of devices scrapped, then it's not an anti-theft device. But it's there are shades of gray. There are ways to make it better. One is to, for example, imagine this scenario. Imagine a recycler or an individual or anyone gets a bunch of machines, and those machines are locked. And so then I log into my iCloud account, apple.com, whatever, iCloud.com, and I click a button that says request unlock. And I put in my serial number, and maybe I pay $5 and I hit go, and Apple does an investigation based on the massive amounts of information they have on every serial number and every owner. And if there are no red flags that appear within 30 days, then it auto unlocks. And keep in mind, too, that just by logging into my account and saying, hi, I am me, and this is a serial number that I am going to associate myself with, there's a ton of information there. They know all about me. They know all about the serial number, the history of that serial. And just by that association, me saying, hey, I'm associated with this computer here, that's a ton. That means a lot, because if that's stolen, I'm incriminating myself. So anyway, so that's one idea, like a 30-day wait period. And by the way, the other half of that idea is if your computer's stolen, you go to Apple, say, hey, computer's stolen, or click a button, computer's stolen. And then when Apple gets an unlock request, they see that red flag and they deny the request. So that's a pretty good system. Another thing that could be done, which I think is, a Twitter friend of mine suggested this, and I think it's brilliant. just have activation lock on for as long as your warranty is good. You buy a computer, buy a Mac, it has a 1 year warranty. So you have activation lock for a year. If you want it extended, buy AppleCare. So it's 3 years. Then Apple could release a product, $10 a year, as far as you want. So as long as you care about that computer, and as long as you're paying for this feature exists. And then when you no longer care about the computer, the feature drops off and it's auto unlocked. So I think these are really great ideas. Is there some risk of theft that creeps in if there is some way to unlock a device? Possibly a small risk, but the thing is, manufacturers these days, they don't want us to believe we have ownership rights of devices. They want us to think that devices are just, it's just something we're leasing from them, and then we give it back, or, we throw it away and they'll give us a new one. They want us to forget that we have ownership rights, and which we do in this country. It's a very important right. And what comes with ownership rights, though, is ownership responsibilities. And that the responsibility that comes with ownership rights is to take care of your stuff. You have a responsibility to look after that, to make sure it's not stolen. Like that's just something that goes hand in hand with owning things. If you own something, you have to be responsible for that thing. So what manufacturers are trying to teach us is you don't have ownership rights. The thing is not really yours. And you don't have a ownership responsibility either. It gets stolen, we give you another one. You lose it, you get another one. Whatever. And so, it's a hard topic, and I know it's not what a lot of people want to hear, but we need to take care of our stuff. We can't just treat it like it's nothing. And the idea that there can be no theft allowed, there's no possibility of theft, is a little bit absurd. But that aside, I don't think there's really that much risk if you just allow a very careful process to be put in place that deals with these issues, that would save millions and millions and millions of devices a year, because there are millions of iPads, iPhones, and now MacBooks that are being scrapped. Let's see, where are we? 26 minutes in. This is supposed to be 40 minutes long. I don't know if it cuts me off after 40. I'm really not sure. But, okay. So, what can you do about it? Very hard to say. Just raise visibility of the issue, talk to people, educate them. I really think we've made a difference with this. As of all the publicity, a couple weeks ago, a lot of people were saying that old devices were becoming unlocked when they went through that Apple process. So iPhone 4s and 5s and things like that. So there was a flurry of people, collectors who had locked devices, going and getting them unlocked, and that seemed to be working for a while. And I don't think Apple is ever going to say, like, okay, we're solving this problem, but I think they could quietly, if they get enough attention, just start doing the right thing more and more behind the scenes. So I think that's kind of how we are going to eventually see this solved more than it's being solved now. They're not going to admit to anything. They're just going to sort of quietly loosen the screws a little bit behind the scenes. Okay, so that is my 25-minute introduction that I thought was going to be 5 minutes. So now we can go on to questions. So if the two of you watching have any questions, please post them. And I'm looking at my viral post, the 2.3 million view post that has thousands of comments. So if I don't get any live comments and questions, I'll just go down that list. So I think I will start doing that. What do you think of the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro screens needing micro-soldering in order to function correctly, adding to the decline of the secondhand market. Yeah, like I said, it really sucks that, at least in the past, you could use these as parts machines. But now, swapping an M1 screen does not give you a perfectly working screen. You don't have True Tone. You don't have, with other parts, you don't have Touch ID and things like that. So yeah, it's just every angle you look at, there's just no viable option, and this causes recyclers to think, well, it's not even worth selling for parts. So that really sucks. Hopefully, Right to Repair will help alleviate. Let's see. I know this is discussed in a lot of something, but is there a good place to fight Apple on this? It's a hard question. It's a hard question. I try and get as much publicity as I can. The Vice article that kind of started all this, the TikTok, a lot of it is just, we do a petition. There is the DMCA, which makes illegal software locks. No, which makes software locks on devices law, has a process, I think every year, to allow an exception. If you can go to the board of people who deal with the DMCA, they allow exceptions. So you can go petition for an exception, like a year-long exception. So something that I and others are looking to do is file an exception with them and possibly get an exception to that for a year. So, for example, maybe activation lock could be illegal for a year. So there's that. Generally, though, I'd just say educate people and make noise. That's what I'm doing. It's hard to do. It's a long road, but I don't know. There's no obvious path to fix this. I say go to recyclers and buy everything they have. Convince them that there's a market for broken product, and that helps. That helps if we get the stuff out of recyclers so that it's not scrapped. I mean, that doesn't necessarily directly affect this problem. So let's see. In the off-lease market, not only is activation lock a nightmare, but the influx of MDM active units filtering through has been a real problem. Yeah, MDM, remote management, that's a whole nother thing. It's kind of a parallel issue to this. Institutions manage their devices in the field and have a client on the devices. And when they dump those to recyclers, they forget to take that off too. And that also, effectively bricks the machine, because when you do that wireless, that Wi-Fi login, it then pops up and says, hey, this is the managed machine, login to MDM. And of course you don't have that login and you're screwed. So yeah, MDM is I could talk for hours on that. That's another issue too. Okay, these devices are stolen. Return them to the rightful owner. It's so funny. It's really funny. It reminds me of that movie Idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen Idiocracy. Well, it's a futuristic place. This guy gets transported to the future, and everyone drinks Gatorade, and they water the crops with Gatorade, and so the crops are dying. And this guy from the past, who's now in the future, is like, well, why aren't you drinking water? And everyone responds to that saying, like, you mean water from the toilet? And it's because the Gatorade company, which is the biggest company in the world at this point, has brainwashed everyone through marketing to believe that water is only something you find in the toilet and is therefore bad. So it reminds me of this issue, because you start talking about this issue and immediately people's knee-jerk reaction is, oh, those are stolen. Return them to the rightful owner. You're a thief. Yeah. So once again, vast majority of activation lock devices are not stolen. They were just not logged out properly. And so many institutions out there, when they dispose of their thousands and thousands and thousands of devices, cannot be bothered to properly log out because that's how much they just don't care. That's where the vast majority of locked devices come from. But this idea that they're stolen, it's the boogeyman. Like, ooh, it's a stolen device, it's locked. Um, yeah, it's just brainwashing. We've got to disconnect ourselves from Apple's greenwashing and their marketing that just programs us to think that. But Apple is a green company. Oh yeah, sure they are. They're yeah, right. They just have a great marketing department. They just are very, very good at marketing, is what it comes down to. And you can't blame people for not knowing the truth on this. The recycling industry is in the rearview mirror for every one of us. Like we don't think about slaughterhouses and how our meat is produced. We have this vague idea that there's some stuff going on, but we just push it out of our minds. Recycling is the same thing. All it takes is a little bit of marketing from Apple to just make us feel good about our purchase. The recyclers and their certifications, they do greenwashing. They say, oh, it's zero landfill. Everything is properly recycled. And that's all it takes. We feel good. It's like, don't tell us anymore. Sounds good. Great. Wonderful. But, behind the scenes, Apple's not a recycler. They don't recycle. People say, oh, send it back to Apple. Well, guess what? Apple will send it to a recycler that they've contracted to destroy the stuff. I've known several recyclers that have been paid by Apple to destroy new products. So, yeah, Apple is, not innocent in this. Let's see. This is by design. This is a good thing. Okay. I don't think there is I don't think there's any evil on the part of Apple here. I don't think, they say between incompetence and what is it, maliciousness. It's incompetence most of the time. So I think they do benefit from this. Tanking viability of products and then people buy a new one. But I don't think it was in the design. I think it's just easy for them to leave it alone and benefit, and they need pressure to change. Just install Linux. Well, unfortunately, as of 2018 and the T2 chip, there is something called the security app. Security setting app in the BIOS. I forgot what it's called exactly. But long story short, the default setting on 2018 plus machines is to disallow booting from an external device. So on these devices, you can't boot from an external device. And you can't, if they're locked. And so you can't install Linux. That would be nice. Additionally, the proprietary chips, the T2 chip, the M1, M2 chip, they're very proprietary such that Linux people have a hard time because you're not dealing with generic chips. Give them to me. I can bypass it. Yeah. So there's a whole bypass community, jailbreak community. And what that comes down to, I can go into that for hours. It's a means of hacking a device so that it can still be used. So when you say bypass, what you're doing is you're bypassing that handshake with Apple. So then it goes past that handshake without being affected, and then you're using the device. The problem with bypass devices, in the cases when it is possible, is that it's just a hack. And when that device is reset, then the lock comes back. So it's really unethical to sell bypassed devices because you're not selling a device that's as good as new. And down the road, even if you tell people it's bypassed, it's going to be reset, and then the person's going to be screwed. So, yeah, it's good for personal use, but you just can't sell bypass devices in a retail environment. Can I buy them from you? No, you can't. I sell wholesale. And besides, look, I've already saved the devices that I have. So what you need to do is go to recyclers, buy from recyclers. There are millions of devices on the chopping block, and just you need to go get those. That's doing more for the world than just trying to buy them from me. People should unlock their machines. Well, yeah, they should, but the reality is they don't. I'm always thinking about the one-click theory, like the Amazon one-click, buy it now. It's so tempting because it's just one button. I think everyone has gone there and just hit buy it now, not thinking it would actually buy it now, and then it just happens. So the theory is, like, every click you require to get something done of a consumer is you lose, like, I don't know, 20% of your potential customers. So if you require like 10 clicks, then you've lost like 90% of people. So why I'm mentioning this is, with something that requires an advanced procedure of consumers, it's not that terribly difficult to remove your iCloud, but for someone who's not technical or someone who doesn't care, yeah, it's a burden. It's a multi-step process, and it's, multi-click, so to speak, and you're going to lose a huge number of people just by the fact that you're requiring this thing, that your process does not accommodate the nature of people and the nature of institutions. Sell them to Lewis. Yeah, actually, I've talked to Lewis. He doesn't want to buy this kind of thing. His goal is for right to repair to eventually be effective and have a way to buy these chips. He doesn't want to repair your brand new device by reaching into the scrap bin and desoldering a chip. He wants to be able to, legitimately buy new chips. And, that makes total sense, For those who aren't tech savvy, how do they become in activation lock mode? That's a good question. Maybe I'm so into this topic that I haven't described the most basic of things. And let's see, we're past 41 minutes. Hopefully this will just keep going. We have a live question. Do you just part them out at this point? Yeah, although, like I said, it's, that's a mixed bag, because the parts are serialized in a lot of cases. And so you put a part with one serial on a computer with a different serial, and that's a mismatch. And so it doesn't do the handshake correctly, and certain features like True Tone and Touch ID stop working. And then you have a machine that does not comply with the feature list, and so you can't really sell it as a retail device. So that sucks. But anyway, back to how do devices become in activation lock mode? Well, when you go buy a new MacBook and you step through the setup wizard, part of that process, the default process, if you just click next, is to log in with your Apple ID. And by default, iCloud is active. And if you decide next week, I don't want this computer, I'm just going to give it to you. Here, take this. And you don't go in specifically and remove it from your iCloud account, then that device is locked. So, you have a computer for 3 years. You don't think about iCloud much because you logged into it 3 years ago. And you give it away or you sell it, and you just don't think to log in. Like the institutions donating machines, you just think, it's just going to be dealt with somehow. I'm not going to take the 2 minutes to do that, or I don't even remember that that's a thing, and so it's locked. Let's see. Putting apples in the bin is not a shame or a waste. It's fulfilling its life cycle and going to the most useful place, back into the ground. Wow. Yeah, I love it when people get all philosophical about this stuff. It's just hilarious, the extent they go to justify all this. I just have to laugh. Yeah, that's just nonsense. That's just rationalizing waste. These are, this is a 2-year-old machine. 2-year-old. Really? Can you really say that because they bought it for one little tiny purpose and they fulfilled that purpose, now this machine is ready to die. It's completely absurd. That's completely absurd. And these another analogy I use is, well, if the original owners have the right to destroy their stuff, what about like a Tesla? What if there was a company that had 100 company cars that were Teslas, and every year they get new cars and they want to dispose of the old ones? And Teslas have data in them. They have some history there. They have drives that, could be recovered conceivably and tell you things about your company. So shouldn't the responsible owner in a company that has 100 Teslas that they want to get rid of, what if that owner decides they want to destroy the Teslas? Does the owner have the right to destroy 100 Teslas? It's easy to say you should destroy computers because the original owners wanted, but extrapolate that out. Should it be legal to destroy 100 good Teslas that are 100 years old because someone wants that to happen? And another thing too, it's like these people, they're like, well, if my computer gets stolen, I don't want anyone to ever use it. And that's just messed up. It's just messed up thinking. Like, if your dog runs away, do you hope it's dead? Like, I don't know. This mentality of, well, if I can't have it, no one can have it. This thing cannot live beyond me. There's something sick there. There's just something psychologically problematic in a person who goes down that road and literally thinks that they're that important that their stuff must die with them. Something a little sick there. Here we go. I'd 100% rather have my laptop go into the e-waste bin than have a thief gain access to my entire life's credentials. Well, one thing, I don't know if I've gone over this much, but this is a wiped computer. This is a wiped computer. It is wiped and it is still locked. So this is not a data security issue most of the time. So, that's kind of off the table. These machines are wiped generally, and they still have a lock. And there's no reason there should be a lock on a securely wiped device. Okay, people don't understand that the Apple's demand for sole right to repair means you don't own it. It was never yours. Yeah, like I said before, the institutions don't want us to think, the manufacturers don't want us to think we have ownership rights, and they don't want us to think we have ownership responsibilities. They benefit from us being naive and just thinking that, we're just leasing a product and we don't have to treat them well, we don't have to do anything. But giving up our ownership rights, our property rights, that's a bigger discussion, but it's not something that's good for us in this country. It means a lot in this country that we have the right to own things. Okay. These are all stolen and you know it. You're part of the problem. And, again, just over and over and over and over, these people are programmed to think this by marketing. And it's frustrating because, like I said, starting a small business is the best thing I ever did. I gained my independence. Thousands of people have benefited from me having a small business. I've trained other people to have small businesses. I have my independence. Like, so many positive things have grown out of the fact that I made that decision to start a small business. And then you just have people who, when it's convenient to them, they just trash small business. They say, oh, they're stolen and you know it. You're making money. Oh, that's another one. Like, you're making money. Therefore, everything you say is corrupt and you can't be listened to. Only someone who is truly separate from the industry, separate from the issue, can be unbiased and can be trusted. Like we have to, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, can it be bypassed by physically removing the M1 chip, which has their security integrated, reprogram the chip, and then you do a reinstall of Mac OS? Maybe that's possible, but where are you going to get another M1 chip? To Lewis's point, you just can't buy one of those at Micro Center. And even if you could, recyclers are getting thousands of devices in. A recycler is a game of Tetris in a warehouse. Think of it that way. There's stuff coming in, big chunks of stuff coming in, and they need to get it out before the place fills up. Because if it fills up, game over. They're not going to take one of those Tetris pieces and dissect it into 1,000 pieces and then spend an hour on each one of those pieces. That's just not viable. That's not viable. So even when there is some sort of crazy technical solution, that's great for you. If you're capable of that, have fun. Great, wonderful. But in terms of solving the bigger problem, it's just not going to work. The instructions from Apple to remove this activation lock should be more clear for the original owner to be able to resale. Yes, it should be more clear, but it should also not require any thought, and it should be something that happens automatically, because like I said, if you require people to do anything of any complexity at all, a chunk of people are just not going to do it. I mean, look at voting. Like, you'd think everyone would vote, but only half the people vote. Not to get political, but it tells you, like, if you put the burden on people, people aren't going to do it half the time. So just right out of the door, this process, simple or not, is completely flawed. It's almost like they did it on purpose. Again, I don't think it's maliciousness. I don't think it's some conspiracy theory or some scheme. Yes, they do benefit from it, but look, I think it's more something that, it works to their purposes, and they need to understand that we, are not okay with the carnage that occurs as a byproduct of this lock. Give them to Apple for recycling. Well, like I said, Apple's not a recycler. You send something into Apple for recycling that is locked, and most likely they're going to grind it up into dust. So that is not necessarily a solution. I commented with you about the activation lock. I would like to get one of these units to disable the lock. Well, first of all, you probably can't disable the lock on an M1. And like I said, you don't want to buy from me, because I've already saved the devices that I've got purchased from recyclers. You'll want to go to the recyclers themselves, convince them that you have a service to offer them, which is to buy their stuff at a higher price than they're getting now, and establish that relationship. And then you too can save stuff from recyclers and use them for parts or do whatever you want to do with them. And I have a good video about that. I'm on YouTube. Follow me on YouTube. Follow me everywhere, actually. My handle is RDKLINC, Roadkill Incorporated. RDKLINC, like Incorporated. I'm on YouTube. I talk about these issues all the time. I show you what recycler lots look like, things like that. So, yeah. And I think that is pretty much it. Let's see how far we have gone. Wow, I have been yapping for an hour, over an hour. That's pretty incredible. I have relations with the places, but they never get Apple stuff. Yeah, recyclers, 5% of what they get is Apple. So what my tactic is, I tend to be like, hey, for that pallet of Apple you get once a year, I'm your guy. And just let them know you're the Apple person. And they don't want to deal with Apple, honestly, because it's only a small percentage of what they get. So it's ironic that they don't want to deal with the best stuff that they get in their recycler. But yeah, building relationships with recyclers is hard, but just keep at it. And once you get a good one, it can last for years, and you can get millions of dollars worth of material. What about a YouTube type device for repair techs that sends a specific handshake to Apple? I don't know. YubiKey, not YouTube. Sorry. I'm not familiar with that device, but yeah, the point is there are possible solutions. It's not as simple as it is the way it is because it has to be, and that's that. There are a million solutions that could be implemented if Apple wanted to, if they received enough pressure. So, yeah. So again, that's about it. I am RDKLINC on all the social networks. And I missed the live, but your activation lock video spoke to me. I manage a 4-warehouse remarketer. Cool. I think this video is going to be posted for 30 days or something. I don't know. This is my first stream, literally my first one ever. So I don't even know how to end this stream. Does anyone know how to end the stream? I don't see like an end stream button. There are solutions, yes, but I don't have one, so I can't find it. Wow, lots of comments all of a sudden. Nightmare lately with activation lock and MDM. Yeah, I agree. These are all just different nails in the coffin, you know. I'm literally switching to retro. I'm literally switching to, you know. Look at this MSX machine. Isn't it beautiful? 3 cartridge slots. I mean, it's like a Ferrari or something. Yeah, I'm switching to retro because no right to repair issues there, and the machines have much more personality, and you know, they're fun. They're like sculptures or something. Problem is, there's not as much money in retro, and I need to eat. So anyway, I will now see if I can end this. Thank you for watching. Feel free to reach out to me, John at rdklinc.com. And let me see if I can figure out how to end this. Thanks, everyone.